I just found out two things that are making me kick myself. So the first of this is students in schools with CAD Academy and Lab in charge who ensured high level of usage, 1 hour per week, scored 0.44 to 0.47 standard deviations higher than students in the control group. CAD Academy only without lab in charge, or at the end of the year mathematics assessment, according to Oriopoulos, Keynes, Kirshikashi, and Agarwal 2006, who conducted randomized control trials of 5,500 students or 55,000 students across 74 schools in India. Students who use CAD Academies as part of year-long mastery learning intervention improved their end of score math scores by 0.12 to 0.22 standard deviations, according to Oriopoulos, Gibbs, Gensen, and Price, who conducted randomized control trials of nearly 11,000 students, grades 3 through 8. Weekly usage of CAD and Academy resulted in positive effects on math scores and attitudes towards math when implemented with adequate support, according to Friedman, Finnemore, and Lima, who conducted large-scale randomized control trial across 157 primary schools in Brazil. Supplemental use of CAD Academy resulted in better math scores than teacher-only interventions, according to Butch, Jacob, Kushanas, Suffin, Baratti, who conducted large-scale randomized control trials with 3,500 third through sixth grade students in El Salvador. Students who used CAD Academy during 19-day summer program had better algebra readiness scores, according to Snipes, Hung, Jacket, Findelson, who conducted randomized control trials with 496 seventh grade students in a Silicon Valley school district, and that is down in Silicon Valley in particular. And they're showing even mid score, tier two moderate evidence. He even Can is even smart enough to grade the quality of the evidence, which is really cool. That he's that smart. Anyways, a study published by the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, a top peer-reviewed journal, used a rigorous methodology to account for both teacher and student characteristics in a longitude data set of around 200,000 students across hundreds of districts. Anyways, and this is a pretty big, robust study that we're seeing with that large of a sample size. I can't believe he considers that moderate evidence. That's strong. Yeah. Students who increased their usage of CAD Academy over 3 years saw gains on the end of year state achievement test. A 3-year panel study with teacher, student, and year fixed effects in New York NG found that increasing CAD Academy by 18 hours or 60 skills mastered over years can almost double the average year to year NG LSA gains. So this is students who increased their usage of CAD Academy from year to year saw corresponding gains in learning as measured to MAP growth scores. A quasi-experimental study with student and teacher fixed effects for student ability and teacher quality found that increasing usage by 10 to 60, 30 to 60 skills per year can lead to 15 to 30 APP gains in learning. Students who use supplemental CAD Academy and blended classrooms also had higher performance in the standardized math assessments, according to a quasi-experimental study with ninth grade students. Students who use CAD Academy were more likely to have better math performance than a traditional math intervention program, according to results of quasi-experimental data in the third grade students in Guatemala. Well-designed and implemented in correlational studies, Tier 3 students who use CAD Academy Math Accelerator for 30 minutes per week saw better math growth than math scores compared to students who used Math Accelerator for less time. This was the main finding of a correlational study with statistical controls conducted by Weatherhans. Students who spent more time using CAD Academy's official prep 2s were more likely to score higher on the SAT, according to correlational studies with controls. And yes, I know that correlation isn't causation. I think, we've all heard that phrase 1,000 times by now. But, it's I guess I could say that if there is a correlation, it's often more probable that it is causation. It doesn't mean that it necessarily is, though. Use of CAD Academy among middle school students in the long PhD-defined school districts were linked to better performance and on standardized assessment, according to a correlational study by Weatherholmes and Chatterham. Community college students who used Khan Academy were more likely to score higher on AccuPlayer's math assessment, according to a study by Chan, O'Connor, and Pete. So, read about how our part from consistently drives results that surpass typical growth expectations. A growing body of research indicates that the CAT Academy's personalized mastery learning has on driving learning outcomes. CAT Academy is the leading online resource entrusted by U.S. teachers and students. Read about how our platform consistently drives results that surpass typical growth expectations. Multiple studies show that Can's effectiveness is in learning drives learning gains. A cross section of high quality research studies that have evaluated the effectiveness of CAT Academy. Now I want you to see something else. College algebra is typically ineffective, acting as a barrier to graduation rather than a bridge to opportunity, with roughly 50% of students failing or withdrawing from the course. Ineffective teaching methods, lack of student preparedness, and a disconnect between abstract content and real world application contribute to high failure rates, disproportionately affecting first generation and non white students. And this does impact me as a white student, you know, as well. You know, the algebra crisis isn't about, algebra. Simply switching from one curricula to another will not produce different results if the underlying teaching philosophy remains unchanged. That will merely expose students to different math problems, not a more effective teaching and learning approach. Improving math education requires a novel approach, one that prioritizes engagement, relevance, and foundational skill development over memorization and test preparation. Addressing the preparedness gap requires addressing the most fundamental math concepts and students most fundamentally complain about math and the perception that math is irrelevant to their current everyday lives and their future careers. Teachers, administrators, and educational advocates alike must commit to interventions and strategies that emphasize the conceptual understanding and make it age-appropriate and career-relevant. Schools must say goodbye to remediation that merely rehashes and ineffective teaching methods, which struggling students have already struggled to connect with, and instead focus on increasing meaningful learning experiences that help learners build confidence and competence in mathematics. The solution lies in improving the quality of engagement, not the quantity of homework assignments or instruction times. Until the focus shifts from algebra itself to students' readiness for it, math performance across the country is unlikely to improve. The stakes are too high to continue with business as usual. Students deserve an education that equips them with the skills to need, not just in algebra, but in life. So yes, I agree with this idea. So here is the thing about it. College algebra... He says that it's out logarithms, but it's not logarithms. It's just the whole thing moves too fast. Many courses overlook everyday financial literacy, so that's, out. But fundamental, those people are not like me. I'm studying, because I realize that even though these things aren't necessarily directly relevant to financial literacy, they will impact finances anyways because they affect the kind of work I will be eligible to do. So anyways, why these caps exist, so anyways, how common is it to fail at college algebra? So results are that college algebra is commonly shocking stumbling block to graduation. About 50% of students each year fail to pass college algebra with a grade of C or better, according to the Mathematical Association of America. So what this spells out to me is that it is a people fail, at a very sky high level in college, and yet CAT Academy is effective, at teaching people. Millions of people are failing to complete this particular course in America these days. Millions are failing college math and how to fix it. Across this country, millions of students walking into math classrooms are worried about their future. For decades, mathematics, particularly college algebra, has functioned less as a bridge to opportunity than as a barrier to completion. Nationally, college algebra is one of the most common stumbling blocks to degree completion, with high failure rates and withdrawal rates that disproportionately affect first generation and non-white students. And in my case, I guess I'm just an antidote where it has spread to a white student, so it affects me. I had to drop, so I'm part of the statistics now. For many students, the challenge is made all the more frustrating because they are unconvinced of math's relevance. I am not unconvinced of its relevance. That's a big difference. I know it's relevant, you know? I just still have been struggling with it. Mathematical thinking is valuable for everyone, but for many students, it's taught in ways that appear abstract and disconnected from real world applications and divorced from their aspirations. It's less so far, but it is taught no matter where. It's hard to see the connection at this stage, but I know if I stick with it long enough, it will become clearer and clearer. So I'm encouraged. The disconnect has been real consequences, not just for persistence, graduation, and career readiness, but also for informed citizenship. Math has never been more relevant. Mathematical thinking and reasoning are not only shaping how we navigate our personal finances and other everyday tasks, but also how we make sense of the growing flood of data and information around us and harness the power of artificial intelligence. Yet educators continue to present math as something external that students must reach to connect with. In reality, math is already embedded in our daily lives, from nurses' college to calculations to technicians' welding measurements. Math is everywhere, even if it doesn't always look like math. Redesigning college math experiences from instruction to internships means ensuring that that students learn actually equipped with the reasoning and problem solving skills that their careers will demand. You know, Over the past decade, states and institutions have begun moving in that direction. A growing number of institutions have at hard ways that are more tightly aligned with students' programs of study and career goals. But college algebra fails. It's very poorly taught due to a focus on research over pedagoggy. Instructors lack teaching skills and a sink or swim approach that prioritizes fast-paced abstract theory over conceptual understanding. Common issues include, as suggested by users on Reddit, not being able to explain concepts clearly, a lack of instructor engagement, poor explanation of concepts, and the use of introductory courses as gatekeepers. That's all there and everything, and there are now evidence against that these courses are particularly effective. And there's this whole there's this whole problem in it where one of the biggest problems facing college-bound students today is increasingly bad math education they are getting from schooling before college. Yeah, but what happens if the math instruction is terrible in college as well? I mean, Jeff, we're not getting good instruction in college either. Have you considered that? My professor sucked at his job. He did a terrible job of teaching the course. Your teachers don't know mathematics for the most part. They know just enough to be dangerous. Let's follow a teacher through the requirements to graduate with a degree in teaching, specifically in mathematics. Calculus and linear algebra, certainly the course descriptions may look intimidating, but the fact of the matter is that the majority of this is covered in many high school classes. Remember, that most of your teachers are just like you. Most of you, when they were in college, they probably bumbled their way through these courses. That means, like you, our happiest teacher to be may have bumbled their way through and managed a passing grade. Sound familiar? Statistics. I took the advanced version of college statistics. It was still mostly covered in high school. Apparently, the normal course was almost exactly what a high school starts. So basically, your teachers, by and large, are just like you. They know just enough to math to scrape by the required courses. And let's face it, that was years ago. They may know even less now than they did then, because every book they've had since then was the teacher's edition. And we all know what that means. Answers. The real math skills have probably atrophied. I want to remind you that I'm making sweeping generalizations. Hopefully you've experienced a teacher who knows math despite all the obstacles. Unless you were lucky, not all of your teachers are exceptions. Teachers have had two kinds of professors in college. Professors for their teaching courses. Many of these professors really have a grip on reality. Ever looked at some of the crazy education ideas floating around? They all came from one of these dudettes. They're teaching. They are all teaching. They are teaching your teachers how to handle quote children, what they need to know to be certified, and making them write paper after paper on educational theories, which, since your teachers are just like you and me, tend to be ignored right after the class is over. Overall, that's good. Maybe you've had a misfortune of having a teacher who actually believes one of these crazy theories. Well, the experience is probably memorable. I bet you didn't learn much. It happened to me twice. I didn't, and I know I didn't learn much. These people extend the old adage: those who can do, those who can't teach. Those who can't even manage that teach how to teach. Who can't even manage that teach how to teach. There are exceptions, but there are some incredibly good teaching professors. Just so there's some incredibly good teachers, but again, they're the exceptions. Since the teaching profession as a whole tends to reward whacked out ideas over good ones any day, the truly good teaching professors will rarely be the most famous and recognized faculty member. Professors for the math courses, you could hope that they might learn something here. Basically, in essence, I fucked up, okay? I'm coming on YouTube to admit to a mistake. You have poorly prepared math teachers in the colleges, and the truth of the matter is that, you know, schools and colleges are teaching the wrong type of math, and everything, and there are more and more, results suggesting that people, are just absolutely failing at this, that over half the class, basically doesn't make it through this system at all, that college algebra basically acts as not as something that is there to shall we say, it's not there to teach people, it's there to act as a gatekeeper to keep out what they see as the unworthy. This is a sorting system, not an institution of learning. And so, how I fucked up was I went and took one of those courses in the first place. I should have stuck to my guns. I've said this before. I have done a better job of teaching myself on Cat Academy with YouTube instructors than I ever. And I've learned more from YouTube instructors than I will ever learn from those goddamn classrooms. So, yeah. Apparently, my professor was terrible at his job, and most people fail to pass college algebra. At least a good half of them do. Whether they will pass or not is a bit of a fucking coin flip at this point. And I can't. I anticipate that in the future it will start looking more like 60-40, 40% passing and 60% failing, and it will just go down and down and down. And the truth of the matter is that I've got evidence that Cat Academy works. I have very little that college algebra is effective. To me, 50% of people failing is not, proof that, oh, at least 50% made it through. That must be effective. That's proof that they're failing a good half of the public and that are just getting left behind by the system. And if you have a 50% failure rate, you're not worth the value proposition, is what I'm trying to say. You're not worth the money. If why would I pay for a course if it's essentially a coin flip as to whether I'll pass?